Good evening. I'm Lauren McCoy. A special grand jury indicts outgoing Orleans Parish Sheriff Susan Hutson and the Sheriff's Office's Chief Financial Officer. The Attorney General says that the charges are related to last year's jailbreak. So the sheriff is charged with malfeasance in office, filing or maintaining false public records, obstruction of justice, and with conspiracy to commit each of those alleged crimes. It's 30 charges in total. Chris Joseph is live at criminal court with what the AG says about these charges. Chris.
If you'll remember, in the aftermath of last May's escape, the Attorney General's office took over the investigation relatively quickly. It said it would work with local, state, and federal agencies to come to a conclusion. Well, this appears to be at least part of a conclusion that the Attorney General's office has reached. It released a statement about the findings, reading in part, while Sheriff Hutson did not personally open the doors of the jail for the escapees, her refusal to comply with basic legal requirements and to take even minimal precautions in the discharge of her duties directly contributed to and enabled the escape. Attorney General Liz Murrill saying she is working with incoming Sheriff Michelle Woodfork to secure the jail, releasing a statement reading in part, "As my prosecutors move forward with this case, I continue to have productive conversations with the Sheriff-elect, Michelle Woodfork, on how to improve operations, secure the facility, and build in basic financial oversight that complies with state law." Woodfork, again, who takes over in just a matter of weeks, says that she has not gotten an opportunity to review the indictment in full. Her statement, reading in part, "This Monday, or I should say days, takes over in days. This Monday, I will assume leadership of the Sheriff's Office with a firm commitment to accountability, transparency, and integrity." So as for the narrative of these charges, the background, the context of what specifically led to each charge, we have asked the Attorney General's office for more information. Potentially that information might live in an arrest affidavit. The Attorney General's office saying it's not going to release that at this point. We may get that answer at a hearing tomorrow morning. Both Sheriff Hutson and her Chief Financial Officer, Bianca Brown, who's also facing similar charges, are expected to be here at Orleans Parish Criminal District Court. That hearing is going to be first thing tomorrow morning. Right now, Hutson faces a bond of $300,000. Brown, for her part, faces a bond of $200,000. Both have had to surrender their passports. Of course, we'll potentially learn more in this hearing as to what exactly transpired. We have reached out to the Sheriff's Office for Hutson's reaction to this news that she's been indicted. No word yet, despite an email and a phone call we have made in that direction. Again, potentially we'll hear from the sheriff herself when she appears in court. We will be there, of course, first thing tomorrow morning. Reporting in New Orleans, Chris Joseph, Fox 8 Local First.